Hello, NFL fans, and welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to try and determine who was the best non-playoff team at the end of week 17 to not make the playoffs. Who was left out of the playoffs and you would consider to be the best team at the end of the season and 2025. Now, you can make the case for the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson was in and out of the lineup, backup quarterback. You can also make the case for the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons were chasing the Carolina Panthers down the stretch. You can make a case for the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings won their last 5 games, and you can make the case for the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys had the number 3 most explosive offense in the NFL. The problem is their defense was 18th, meaning they gave up a lot of big plays. So you can make for the case for the Cowboys. And finally, you can make a case for the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions had a winning record and they had talent on their team. If you believe I left someone out, please put it in the comments, Tampa Bay or wherever else you think should be brought up in this discussion. But I'm going to give you the team that I felt like was the best team left out of the playoffs last year. So let's talk about it. In my opinion, I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions as the best team left out of the playoff. Now, you can push back on that, but I'm picking the Lions. Number one, they had a winning record. They finished the season at 9-8. And one of the biggest reasons I selected the Detroit Lions is because they had a point differential, meaning points for, points scored versus points against. They were plus 68, which means they outscored their opponents over a 17-game period by 68 points. And that is usually a very strong indicator that that's a playoff team. Now, it didn't work out for the Lions. They did not make the playoffs, but I think that's one of the reasons I consider them the best team. This point differential put them in the top 10 in terms of point differential in the entire NFL. So that's a big plus for Detroit being one of the best teams left out. Not only that, if you look at that Detroit roster, it was loaded with talent. He was first team All-Pro. Jack Campbell, linebacker, was first team All-Pro. And then they had Pro Bowlers, Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, Hutchinson, Brown. They had about at least 5 or 6 Pro Bowlers and 2 first team All-Pros. So definitely talent on the roster. Okay. Definitely stacked talent wise. And, I mentioned Minnesota. If you could just compare the quarterbacks, Minnesota, I can't even remember who played quarterback for them last year, but you had Jared Goff versus the Minnesota quarterback. You have the list of Pro Bowlers and first team All-Pro players that I just mentioned. Detroit is definitely one of the most talented teams. I think that did not make the playoffs. That's just my opinion. You combine that with point differential, I think it was Detroit. The Super Bowl champions had 5 or 6 Pro Bowlers or first team All-Pro. That's how stacked Detroit was. But yet they did not make the playoffs. And that's the question. Why did Detroit not make the playoffs? Why were they left out? I think there are 3 reasons. The first reason is I think losing a defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. And I know you laugh when you say Aaron Glenn. He's the coach of the Jets, and the Jets had a miserable season. But the combination of Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn over the last 2 seasons, Detroit Lions went 27-7 with those guys as the coordinators. So they had something going. I think losing both coordinators had an effect on Detroit. And I think that was one of the reasons they had a down year. So the loss of the coordinators were big. Now, of course, they were replaced, but I think losing both of them definitely had an impact on the team. The second thing, and I know all teams go through injuries, so I get it. But Detroit had a lot of injuries last year. They lost Sam Laporta. They lost one of their cornerbacks, Arnold, and they were without Brian Branch for a long stretch of time last year. So just the amount of injuries, I think that also caught up with them. But with all that said, Detroit still had a chance to make the playoffs. And it came down really to that Christmas Day game against Minnesota Vikings. And now Detroit needed the game. They were still alive, and they completely laid an egg against the Vikings. This game was so bad. Detroit Lions turned the ball over 6 times in this game. And I think at that time, they had a total of 8 turnovers at that point during the season, and they had 6 in this one game. So they really wet the bed in that game, and that really cost them their chance at the playoffs. So they were there at the very end. They had a chance and blew it. They blew it. Now, that could be a combination. Now, I'm talking about the injuries. that kind of stuff catches up to you. And in terms for the Vikings, that kept their win streak going. Remember, they ended the season on a 5-game win streak, and one of those wins were against Detroit. That was the Detroit season in a nutshell. The Christmas Day collapse just really, really killed. Now, coming into the season, I mean, they were talking Super Bowl, favorites. If not to get to the Super Bowl, they would be in the Final Four. Long-suffering franchise, in terms of not getting to a Super Bowl. I think the coaching changes, and I think the injuries caught up with them, and that Christmas Day collapse really did them in. I think the Detroit Lions were the best team to get left out of the playoffs because of the talent on the roster, point differential. And point differential, it's really a key indicator in terms of who makes the playoffs. I did a whole video on that. You could check that out. And usually if you're a plus 20, you're a playoff team. And Detroit was plus 68, and they did not make the playoffs. Those are the main reasons. If you feel a different way, put the team you think in comment. I know Cowboy fans may feel a certain way, but the Cowboys' defense was just atrocious. It really was. You can make an argument for Atlanta, but I'm going with the Detroit Lions, and I'm sticking with them for the reasons I just mentioned. Guys, hit me up, subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to your comments. Peace.